All right, we are back in our regular session. I apologize for those who came here and weren't expecting an executive session. As a way of apology, I offer you sandwiches and chips in the back. And again, I apologize that went a little bit longer than I expected. So now I believe we need a motion. What is the exact nature of the motion, Ms. McPherson?
Pursuant to code, you must determine when to make the tapes of this executive session public. The advice conveyed in executive session is subject to attorney-client privilege and that's not legally required to be disclosed at any time. That said, I understand the will of the body to apply the rules set by AMC 230-035B2A for discussion of a pending legal matter, and I would thus look for a motion that the tapes of this session shall remain confidential until the date when all causes of action related to the two quasi-judicial hearings before the body have been resolved by final judgment, or when any further claims arising from the matter are otherwise time barred.
Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Any opposition to that motion? Okay. It will be done as you just said. Okay, so now we can move forward with the regular special meeting. So I want to, before we get going with the evidence today, I want to sort of lay out for the public and for my colleagues the plan of action for this quasi-judicial hearing. So today we're going to hear from the state, and we're going to watch, Mr. Fern is here too, and we're going to watch the video, and we're going to ask questions about that. We had originally intended to have another special meeting on September 7th when we would have heard from municipal employees and heard the case from Respondents Council. Unfortunately, Respondents Council is not available on that day. So instead, we're going to, and again, keep in mind this is all time constrained because of the state application. So instead, my intention is that we have that discussion on the night of September 11th. That is, we do our regular business, we conclude it, we change the order of the day, and we take this up at the end. And then on the night of September 11th, we hear from municipal employees, and we have the full case presented by Respondents Council. It is not my intention, unless we get through that very quickly, that we do the discussion and hear about remedies on September 11th. Our attorneys also need some time to prepare sort of potential remedies that we can take in this case, because it's not a suspension hearing, it's not a revocation hearing, it's a renewal. It's the first kind of this that we have done. So there will be another special meeting on September 14th, and my intention is that we will hear the remedies from the attorneys, have our debate and discussion, and take final action on September 14th. That is the current plan of action.
Which final action?
I'm sorry, say again?
Final action when?
September 14th, the special meeting next in two Fridays. Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think it's time for disclosures.
Oh yeah. So yes, let's now do disclosures of any ex parte contact you might have taken. We'll start with Mr. Constant.
Thank you. So, as I previously disclosed to council, I have had on numerous occasions conversations with council for the licensees, and these conversations are far-reaching on many topics. And so, clearly, we have had conversations about this case, not since the meeting on Tuesday, at which point it was clearly delineated that ex parte contact is not allowed. Though we did have a committee meeting here, and I did speak only for the first time with the licensee herself at the doorway, I didn't offer any evidence or any kind of position on how things would come out about the circumstance. And so I just make that disclosure so that it's fully on the record and everybody's made aware.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you. I disclosed this at the Tuesday night meeting, but right after a Community and Economic Development Committee meeting, I had driven over to the location, and when I drove past, I rolled my window down and I drove back, and at that time I did notice an odor of marijuana, and I disclosed that Tuesday night. But again, it was before the Tuesday night hearing, so in my view, I didn't think it was ex parte communication, but I wanted to make, or my independent fact finding, I just wanted to disclose it so everybody knew I was there.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After the Community Economic Committee meeting, I also drove over there. I parked and I walked around the building. I did not smell an odor at that time. I did notice that there were 17 air exchangers that have been installed on the back of the building. I assume those are there to try to stop the smell from getting out into the public airways. But I did not go inside, did not talk to any individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Is there any other individual? We'll start with Mr. Dyson. We'll come to you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, just previous to our Tuesday night meeting, I drove over, parked in the parking lot, walked around, looked around the dumpster,
Oh.
and so on and so forth. And I did have a phone call from a mutual acquaintance of myself and I believe the owners, you know.
Oh, yeah, actually, I'll disclose that too. An acquaintance reached out to me as well, but I did not end up meeting with them.
Yeah, and I did.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Bosky?
I just forgot the next day we had scheduled, I was gonna go tour their facility. But when I showed up the next day, they had actually been shut down, I think. So I knocked on the door, but nobody answered, so I drove away, so.
Okay, Mr. Croft?
Yeah, Saturday, the 25th in the morning, I went around a couple of different ones, but including the Tudor Road site, and just walked around.
Okay. Ms. McPherson?
If I might just offer a few initial comments on the scope of the decision-making authority here in this particular proceeding.
Yeah.
So I reminded the body of this in executive session. I wanted to again on the record in the public meeting that the.
Sorry,
Oh.
that didn't mean to happen. That's confusion. I'm so sorry, guys. Sorry about that. That's really embarrassing. It didn't do that on that other bottle that
It's okay, that was, for the record, that was a soda, not a gunshot.
Scary sounding.
I was starting to crawl under the table.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry. No, it's just terminated. I'm sorry, guys. Swear to God, I did not mean to do that.
Okay, let's move forward. So Ms. McPherson, you were
So what I was
saying?
saying was, again, a reminder that this is a license renewal proceeding, not a revocation or suspension proceeding, which require different processes under the code. As such, the options before the assembly are to renew the application without conditions, to renew with conditions, and the code provides the assembly with very broad latitude to impose any conditions or restrictions that it finds in the interest of the public, or to deny the renewal. There are also two separate applications before the body. You may certainly deny one license and grant the other, or provide different conditions for each license. The list of reasons that you may use under the code to deny renewal of the license are set out in those checkboxes on your S version. One point of clarification that I apologize I did not clarify last time around correctly is that the code states that the assembly will deny an application for renewal if you find that any of those criteria are met. If you find that any of those checkboxes should be checked, the code states that you will deny. So that may require further clarification. I realize I did not offer that advice before the assembly elected to check some of those boxes, so I acknowledge that this is the first time we're going through that, and this is my error. So you may you may wish to change that by amendment, but again, just a reminder that the code does say that you will deny if you determine that those thresholds are met, including operation in violation of a prior condition or operation without being in the public interest. That's what the code says. So just a clarification going forward. So with that, I'll allow you to proceed with hearing the items you were planning to hear tonight.
Mr. Croft and Mr. Weddleton, and then I would like to get to Ms. McConnell if we can.
Yeah. What is the effect of a denial of renewal, and when can they reapply? How long practically would they be shut down before they could reapply?
That's a good question. I don't believe there is a mandated waiting period if a renewal is denied. Mr. Gates may know better than I do, or perhaps Mr. Bosky, or anyone who's part of the crafting of this ordinance. So I believe they would be able to reapply and go through the process immediately, but I could be
I
wrong.
think it might be 1 year. I think there is something in code which we could
Yeah.
But I'd appreciate you guys looking it up while we're doing this. And can I say a renewal period? That is, can I say, we deny the renewal and you should not come back to us for X amount of time, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is? Or is it simply just no on the renewal? Can I specify a time for them to come back? I'm curious.
We will look at the code while you discuss further.
Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up to that is,
Okay.
can we also ask for, instead of a denial of the license, a time frame of pending no operation until the license is renewed. So instead of force them to go through their local and then maybe even their state licensing process, which might take a year or more, even if we say it's only for 30 days, do we have an alternative that doesn't get to that?
Are you asking whether you can suspend the license? You may, but not through this proceeding. The suspension requires different due process protections under the code.
Mr. Welton and Mr. Trainee.
Okay, just a couple of things, and you probably said this and I lost it, but, so if any of the boxes on page 3, lines 20 through 45 are checked, then we will protest the license, or we will
You will
not renew ours.
You will not renew yours.
Okay, so even though this is regarding the renewal, it's ours that we renew. Okay, so if any of those are checked,
Then you will not renew the license.
but we could go, notwithstanding that section of code, we X, Y, Z.
Well, you could certainly find that that these standards are not met, but that there have been other issues and require place conditions on the renewal because you have found other issues to have occurred that don't rise to the level of these findings. But the code phrasing is that you will deny if you determine that these criteria are met.
Thank you, Ms. Wynn Pearson. Mr. Trainee.
Just one thing for this study, just because they have a license from the state, we're not dealing with that here. We're only dealing with the city's license. So our bridge, you have to have both. The state can do their action, which they have, but today we're only dealing with the assembly action. And that's to either grant the license or not grant the license or modify it somewhere.
One minor modification that you do, the two resolutions before you do roll the two items together, it is both your recommendation to AMCO and your decision on the local license that are rolled into these resolutions. You don't have to do them together, but you are, the way they're crafted right now, you are making a decision about what to send to AMCO, whether you protest their renewal or not, and then also what to do with the local license.
Becky, what the state does is immaterial to us.
Certainly, they can do something totally different than what you do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Weldon.
I wonder, could we ask a question for Erica? So, I guess we have a letter here, but what exactly is the position of the state on this line?
That may be what she's here to talk about, right?
That and to show
Welcome back, Eric.
the evidence, hopefully. Yeah, thank you. Ms. McConnell.
For the record, I'm Erica McConnell. I'm the director of the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office. I am here because I have been requested to come and speak to you. AMCO has provided to the clerk's office all of the information on this situation that has been provided to the board. There was originally an accusation with 5 counts and a number of supporting documents. The board had a hearing on that accusation, and they upheld count 1 and fined Alaska Sense $15,000. They don't withhold it. They discarded count 2. They dismissed. Thank you. They dismissed count 2. On counts 3 and 4, they upheld them and fined the licensee $20,000. And that was counts 3 and 4, and then count 5 was withdrawn by myself at the hearing. Because I'm not going to get into the kind of complication of what the board did at their first hearing versus what they did after reconsideration. What I just told you is what their final action. But because they had an initial action which ended up effectively causing a seizure in place of all of the inventory, we had a seizure hearing regarding the inventory, and at that hearing, which was also at the time when the board reconsidered their initial action, they did consider that they had effectively suspended both the Alaska Sense license and the Canabasca license for a period that ended up being a little bit less than a week, I believe. And they released the inventory for both the cultivation license and the retail license, but there were 8 jars of hash oil that were actually seized, were taken away by AMCO, and the board directed that the 2 jars that actually had tracking tags be returned to the product manufacturing licensee who had manufactured the hash oil, and the 6 jars that did not have tracking tags were directed to be destroyed. At the board meeting 2 weeks ago in Fairbanks, the board did renew these licenses with delegation pending hearing from the local government municipality regarding a protest. That period, I believe, is not up. I don't know exactly when it ends.
I'm sorry, say that again, the last 2 sentences.
So because the board only meets every now and then, they will, when we haven't had all of the approvals, say from the local government, the board will approve with delegation pending hearing from the local government that there is no protest.
All right.
If the local government does protest, it would go back to the board at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Sure. So both licenses were renewed with delegation, but the board also, in their hearing and at the board meeting, did, for lack of a better word, chastise the applicant, say they did have concerns regarding how the businesses were being operated and they expected significant improvements from the licensee.
Thank you, Ms. McConnell. So at this time, I was hoping that you could present some of the underlying evidence and just describe it for us. And then also, I believe there's a video that we'll be able to watch regarding the primary day in question.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I do have video. I think it would be more appropriate for Mr. Fern to discuss the video because Mr. Fern
Okay.
was present for a good portion of the video. I was not present.
Okay.
Other than that, you know, you have the written documents that describe our findings and that situation, so I'd be happy to answer questions, but I don't have any sort of prepared presentation.
You know, I don't know if, I know I didn't bring them. Did any of my colleagues bring the written documents? I don't know if we have. I think I put mine in my folder on Tuesday night. Is there some way we could?
Appendix K, I think.
Is there some way we could get those while we're watching the video, Barbara? Is there some way we could get those back before us?
That's your time.
If it's not possible, that's fine. I'm just curious if we could do it in the interim. Yeah.
The document was about a 120-page document that was printed and given to each at the meeting.
Yeah.
And asked that the members save it and bring it back to this meeting. I don't have another 11 copies. I have maybe 5 upstairs.
Okay. Could we bring those then, please? I thought I had put mine in the kind of pocket of my folder.
Too. Mine disappeared out of there.
I think we were just chastised, weren't we?
It's fine. We've despite our war on plastic, we've killed a lot of trees. Okay. So could we, before we start watching this, could we have a description of what this is? And Mr. Fern, you'll be the one presenting this?
Yeah, it's 10:35 a.m. It's the rear of the facility, and there at the top there you see that there are 2 separate dumpsters.
And I'm going to speed this up some so it goes faster.
That's Chief Holscher with the AMCO office. He
No,
does
it's not.
It's
No, this is at 10:30 in the morning
Oh.
on February 16th.
So who is that?
This is we don't know the actual individual. It's, we presume, an employee of the licensee, and the point of showing this video to the board was to show that the cultivation dumpster is on this side, and this is the retail dumpster. It was to show that the cultivation dumpster was opened approximately 10:30 something on the morning of the visit.
And then the action's at 2-ish in the afternoon.
1:30 or so, yeah.
And that's the cultivation dumpster.
Correct.
So it looks like he's having trouble though.
No, you opened it though.
Oh, you
You threw
opened
back
it.
in there. Thank you.
Okay.
Looked like it took 4 minutes to open it.
Erica, I think it's a fair point that they just make, if we watch that video at regular speed.
Sure.
Thank you.
Or you just at least want the time lapse, Chris?
Well, the point they were making was to show that there was an actual struggle to get the thing open, not that it didn't or did open, but that it wasn't easy to open. I think at regular speed, we could determine that better than we could at twice the speed or 4 times the speed.
Well, all we need to do is see the time lapse.
So he's on the retail dumpster at 10:35:38.
So I'm sorry, could you state again, Ms. McConnell? You said there, which one's the cultivation, which one's the retail dumpster?
The cultivation dumpster is closer to the camera, and then the retail dumpster is farther from the camera.
Okay.
Is he picking up bugs from the ground? I don't know what he's doing.
Looks like she's turning her clock.
Bigfoot.
You see Bigfoot up there?
That's what I said, yeah.
Always in the corner of the shot.
Yeah, at least before it's in the sun.
So, that's the cultivation?
Yes.
We got it.
That's what, 10?
Well,
Okay, so it took him like a little less than 3 minutes.
2 to 2.5 I had, it was exactly 10:36 when he started working on the cultivation. And it seemed like the lock was done shortly after 38.
Thank you, Erica.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to this afternoon when you guys are there.
What time do you allow?
So this is 1:28 in the afternoon, and what I believe this will show is when AMCO investigators, MOA enforcement officers, and licensees and employees come out to the dumpster.
Eric, is one of the people coming out gonna be the individuals there earlier opening it? Or is it a different employee that came out with the inspector?
I'm not entirely sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
If you don't mind, may I speed it up until they start coming out?
So could you identify individuals as best you can as they start to come out?
I don't know who that is. So, the gentleman, I'm gonna just pause for a sec. It's my understanding that the gentleman in the white lab coat is Evan Neal. This is Chief Investigator Holscher. I believe that's you, right? Yeah, I believe this is Kevin Collins, Land Use Enforcement Officer Collins. This is Officer Fern, and this is Investigator Whiteman.
Mr. Sheriff, can you have Mr. Fern just describe what's happening?
Can you do that, Mr. Fern?
I think we were talking about getting the dumpster open and locating a key.
So now you had gone to the front of the building, gone inside, talked to them?
Yes, we've gone inside and we're in the office talking prior to coming outside.
When you do inspections, is there usually like 4 of you like that?
No, usually when we do our inspections, we always double team, we always 2 of us go, and I believe the state does the same thing.
So this was coordinated with the state?
Yes. And the reason being was approximately a week before, Officer Collins and I had gone by and we had detected an odor. We also detected some flour on the ground, and we had given them a heads up or warning that they needed to get that under control. And this was the return visit.
So was there flour on the ground that day when you were there?
Yes.
So that ended that segment, is that where they couldn't open it?
This is exactly falling, right? This is
Yeah.
continuing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I don't think they've started to try to open it yet.
Okay.
Is there any objection to watching this one faster, because I don't think they're struggling for a lock at this point?
Well, I would be hesitant to do that unless, does this continue for a long time before they even look for a lock? Otherwise, I think sort of it's analogous to what we just did before, watching the struggle. Now we're watching our investigators be prevented from completing their investigation,
There's
or conducting it rather.
about 5 videos that are each between 1 and 3 or 4 minutes long that seem to involve trying to open the dumpster.
Are they, so Mr. Fern, can you describe, I mean, are you actively trying to open the dumpster at this point?
At that time, no, but what's interesting about this section, when you see people bending over, what they're picking up is flour off the ground. That's where the one photograph of Inspector Whiteman's hand, when he has the flour in his hand, that's what's happening there when the people are bending over, picking up the buds off the ground.
Can everyone in the audience hear okay?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Okay, can you speak up a little bit, Mr. Fern?
Sure.
Mr. Constant, did you, I heard you say something. Okay. Between, at what point did they start to actively try to open the dumpster?
I believe we were waiting for a key to come out here at this point.
Okay.
According to the notes provided by Investigator Holscher on the various segments, I think we have a couple more segments to go.
Okay.
so I
All
can
right.
speed up if you like.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend we follow Chris's advice unless there's some opposition to that, given the number of videos we have to go through. Okay. Let's do that. So I actually haven't been by the site. I think I went there last year once. So could you describe sort of physically the layout again where this is? There's people going back and forth, but I assume those are not retail customers.
No, those are employees.
Okay. This is behind the facility.
This is the opposite side of the building from Tudor Road,
Right.
and to the right would be the municipality of Anchorage Bering Street maintenance facility.
Okay.
Across Tudor Road is a Chinese restaurant.
Yes.
But
I don't know.
dumpsters aren't now in the same location, are they?
I believe they are.
Okay.
No, currently? No.
Oh, they're not?
Yeah, they've been moved down to be further to the
Okay.
east.
So Rich, who looked into that retail dumpster?
Pardon?
Someone looked into the retail dumpster a couple times there.
Which,
Yeah.
We just saw a moment ago, is that,
I don't believe the retail dumpster was locked at that time.
so they don't typically lock it?
No, that's not true. It was locked.
Was it?
The lid was actually attached to the wall.
I've watched it open at least
There
two
was a
times.
lock bar, the lid was open on top of the lock bar on one side.
So it was not secured. That's what we're getting to.
It was, that was.
When people can walk up to it and just go like this,
Well, hold
it's not
on.
secured. I think that's what he was saying, is he saw somebody open it.
Did. I won't give-
So what were they doing to the cultivation dumpster there then? It seemed like it was almost, can't open it but peeking in on it. You can open it just a little.
Yes, correct.
At that time, the lid was plastic and flexible-ish.
That's what we call it.
I don't know if now is a good time for a question of Mr. Fern, but.
Yeah.
Here's my question. Since February, have you inspected for marijuana on the ground and have you found it again?
Yes and no.
So you have inspected again?
We have
And you,
inspected.
since February, have not found any marijuana on the ground?
We have not. We also did an inspection to have them explain their waste disposal program, which was the day we were here, that's what we were really there for, is to want them to walk us through their waste disposal program. And after this date, we did go back and we did get a demonstration of their program, and it was satisfactory.
Okay, and you've been back a number of times since February for your smell violations
Yes,
and various
yes.
other elements. And so for at least this issue, it appears, in your opinion, it's fair to say that they've resolved the question of waste on the ground.
Yes, I have no information to contrary to that.
Thank you.
believe that is Spotty and Lorenzo, is that correct?
Can we slow down there?
Yeah, it's back at normal speed, live speed.
So here, Rich, he's trying to open the dumpster.
No, that's me opening the dumpster, trying.
So what's going on here, Mr. Farr?
It's James Holscher in the center just walked up to the dumpster. He's right next to Evan in the white jacket right now. Here's the thing, he's trying to manipulate the lock. Excuse me.
So it looks like you're having a discussion here. Do you have any idea what the discussion is at this point, or is it?
I think we're just waiting to see if the lock's gonna be opened or not.
Had you guys originally on scene 1331, 32? It looked like when you approached the dump, there was in that range. Now we're at
46.
46.
Mr. Fern, what is your standard, if you have a notice violation or refusal for inspection, what is your remedy under code? What are the standards? How do you deal with that normally?
Well, this is the only one that we've had, so there's really not a normal. Our normal,
Let me rephrase the question. What does the code tell you to do in this case?
the code allows us to issue an immediate citation. We had up until this time, and we have been providing a number of verbal warnings for problems. And it was do appreciate this was all a new industry. We were learning as we went. So this was the one and only issue of a refusal and inspection that we've had.
So what remedy did the code give you? Like, it's a fine? How did you determine the fine? And that kind of part of the next step of the process?
The fine is very specific in the Title 21. It's $500 per violation.
Per violation of refusal of inspection or any violation?
Any violation of the marijuana ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Could could you indicate for us, I mean, I know it's difficult to see from here, but could you indicate for us when the conversation shifts from, we're not gonna be able to, we're trying to unlock this to, you need to cut the lock?
That's coming. We're getting to the point where we're pretty cold here, so. And the state investigators had a previous appointment. They were going to have to depart.
So the conversation, I had thought that the conversation about whether or not to cut the lock happened at the dumpster. Were you saying you went inside?
It's coming.
Oh, okay, so you go inside for a bit.
It's later, yes.
Okay. Can we perhaps skip ahead?
We can.
So the employees were thinking that the lock was frozen, is that what the situation was?
Yes.
Mr. Friend, did they have the right key? Because there's two keys in there, one for the retail, one for the agricultural one. Was there a problem with which key they had?
Yes. I don't think the key that Chief Holscher was trying to use was the right key, because he had told me that it was labeled retail, the tag on it. So I don't know, I can't say 100% if we were given the proper key or not. I have my own feelings, but I can't say 100% yes or no.
Chief Holscher testified to the board that he did not believe it was the right key.
Who gave them the keys?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Who gave them the keys? The applicant?
Mr. Gonzalez, I believe.
That produced both keys?
So we heard testimony that one inspector was able to insert the key into the lock and one wasn't. Do you have recollection of that?
I remember Chief Holscher was able to put the key into the lock, but it just would not turn.
Right, okay, so one, but you did not, or your team did not?
I did handle the key that day, and it would not go into the lock. I think it was a second key.
So, note, this is now 2:04. I'm gonna go faster until people come out.
So, Mr. Friend, was the lock cutting before or after this break?
After.
The lock cutting discussion?
Right, it was after.
So
Okay,
you're
and back to
returning.
normal time.
Can you identify who is there again?
I'm to the right, Evan Neal, and then Kevin Collins.
Oh, I thought you had the best.
No.
Okay.
So are those all, I'm sorry, I don't know their name. Those are all inspectors? Those are employees, right?
I'm to the left. Evan Neal is the
This guy.
Alaska Sense employee.
Okay.
And that's Kevin Collins in the fluorescent vest.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe this is where I had a key. I was trying to get it in the lock, and it was obviously not the right key.
Rich, who do you say the guy was that's there with you from the business?
He's Evan Neal. He's an Alaska Sense employee.
Evan Neal? Okay.
He was at the community development committee.
Does he still work for the guy?
Yeah, he got it. He got injured, water tank partially filled up, fell on him when they were in, closed status.
Do you want me to speed up?
What are they doing here?
Rich has gone off.
I had gone over to the Bering Street facility to borrow the pair of bolt cutters at this point.
Now it's at 14:06. You went over, now we're at 14:07.
So if they thought the lock might have been frozen, why didn't you try to get a torch or something to thaw it out?
Bolt cutters were available next door. I knew they had some. They wanted to open the dumpster. It was a $5 or less lock.
Yeah, could you describe the lock to your best abilities?
They were the typical smaller padlock. I wouldn't say they were anything specialized lock.
So we received some testimony at CED meeting that it was a very expensive and unique lock. Is that your opinion? It was?
I didn't notice it to be an expensive lock. It seemed to be just a normal padlock to me.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I think that one of the rationales behind accepting the violation was that they recognized what they did wasn't proper. And so I think that goes to an understanding of this whole process at this time was a mistake.
Or a violation of law.
Absolutely. And a violation of law that they were cited for and admitted to, et cetera.
That's not what you're feeling about.
That is.
So what are y'all waiting for now? Do you know?
I'm over in Berry Street.
Okay, you're getting the bolt cutters.
And Mr. Wright.
I think he comes
yeah.
back at about 226, 227.
We can,
Yeah, we can forward to that. There they are.
So you're back at 209, just after with the bolt cutters?
yeah. That's right, Rich?
Yes, I'm back, and I had contemplated cutting lock, and I caught myself and just thought better of doing that.
What was the rationale there for not cutting it?
I didn't have a warrant to search it.
You don't think that the code grants you the authority to do that under the rules that are established?
No.
You're waiting for their permission to do it?
Yes. That's,
There's some talk about them doing it, or you doing it, or them saying you should do it.
when I came back, I just walked up to the dumpster. It was my intention to cut the lock, and then I caught myself and realized that, no, I can't do this. You know,
Right.
I was getting ahead of myself there. So
Did you offer to the individual from the company there for them to cut the lock?
that's coming.
Did they ever say that you could cut the lock, give you permission to do
No, I offered them the bolt cutters to remove the lock three separate times. I asked if you're refusing the inspection by not removing the lock.
it? Yeah, was there ever the offer that you could go ahead and cut it? That is them saying, you have our permission for you to do it?
No.
I didn't catch that, so they never gave you permission to cut it?
No.
You asked for it, and did not get it?
I did not ask for it. I asked them to cut the lock.
So from a legal person, if we have the right responsibility to inspect these places, do we need a warrant? I mean, you went there.
The way the code is drafted, generally in all of our inspection provisions, an inspector may show up to inspect a code violation if they refuse access to the premises. So for instance, if they come for anything, they come to your premises because there's smoke coming from the backyard, and you physically say, no, you cannot come on my land, they're not allowed to push past you or push down your door or inspect. Mr. Fern is correct, that in the event that he is not permitted to forcibly enter a portion of a licensee's premises without an administrative warrant to conduct a code violation search.
Rich, when you offered them the bolt cutters, what did they say?
No.
They wouldn't do it?
Mr. Evan Neal was the one basically running the conversation, and he was saying no.
So their client said no to you?
Yes.
So who, oh, okay. What's the next
Is
one?
that happening now, or that's coming up?
That's coming up right now.
So could you state again, who's in this video now?
Kevin Collins is in the fluorescent vest. My back's immediately to Miss Warder is to the right. Lorenzo Gonzalez and Evan Neal are to the left. Mr. Neal has put a jacket on, but you can still see his white coat underneath that.
Thank you.
which I'm assuming the conversation is going between you and Evan, it looks like where you're discussing potentially opening, using the bolt cutters.
Yes.
And who's peeking in there?
I am.
Bolt cutters going where?
That's the bolt cutter going back to Bering Street.
Because at this point, they have refused to open the dumpster
I
with the bolt cutters.
I specifically asked them, are you refusing an inspection? And Mr. Neal said yes.
So that was at 1414? We're at 1430.
No, 1414?
Yeah, we're at 1430.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't see that. It was just after 14.
Eric, at what point do they actually open the dumpster?
We will get there.
We're almost there.
How much longer is it, you know?
It looks,
Well, there's still an inspector there, so. it's
I
not
think
gonna
it,
happen.
I think it'll be the next video.
Did the
Or,
bolt
no, a
cutters
couple
come
more
back, or They
videos.
actually find the key and open it that way? Eric?
The bolt cutters do not come back.
Okay, thank you.
So what is happening now? The bolt cutters have left. What's the conversation now?
I'm not, I don't know, I'm not there at that time. Mr. Collins is with Mr. Neal and Ms. Warder, and my recollection is when I come back, we depart.
Okay. That's that one of the state inspectors could be here today.
Erica, with your team, did they cite the licensees for the refusal to inspect?
Yes.
Okay, and even though they really weren't there because they had to leave, did they
That was part of the
rely-
accusation.
And did they rely on our, the munis or process for that?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So
So
in
this is
some ways,
different.
both of the proceedings are tied together as one. Because of the dependence on the same information and actions.
Okay, so now you have exited.
We've departed.
So you've departed. Now these are just,
Into the record.
these are employees or owners of the facility.
Correct.
All right, sir. This body is overwhelmingly popular by attorneys.
That's a true statement.
We need real people in this.
Attorneys are people too.
Of course.
Austin,
Of course, you have
Austin's
three.
there too.
I know there's three now.
Austin, there's three
I know,
now.
but she's not here.
She's on the body.
Okay, so now effectively the city inspectors have departed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now is this the next video, Erica?
Yes.
Okay,
So now it becomes important to look at the times. We don't have any.
so it's been about,
Employees,
what, 2 minutes maybe since the city employees left?
2:17 now.
And is it a while before we see the employee come out to the dumpster?
It's a couple minutes. Would you like me to speed up?
Yeah, I think we can speed up until.
Because what we're really focused on is what's happening around the dumpster, and I think we can look at timestamps to decide that.
Understood. Impressed with the video, Eric. Good equipment, incredible.
Well, it's
There.
their equipment.
You mandated that thing.
It's getting equipment, like, it's not useful for seeing people's faces.
Okay, I'm gonna skip the next video and jump to number 149.
So it's 1420.
Okay. And
14:23 now.
The
So it's,
inspectors left about 14:15, right there, around there.
so it's been about 7 or 8 minutes since employees departed.
Now, who is this walking out there? Do we know?
I don't know.
Can the applicant tell me who are these two people?
Videos.
pretty old, I don't recollect who it is.
That they're employees.
Yeah, employees.
You don't know who those two people are?
No, I have 50 employees at the time, I don't remember who they are just by looking. I don't know.
And one of those is not you?
Oh, no, I never went back outside that day.
And they just,
No.
okay, they're looking, they're thinking.
I mean, what do they have? Mr. Chair, can I say something about what's happening right there?
If it's,
My client tells me that's a torch, or a little, like, you know, one of those little torch that they sell at shops.
thank you.
So who was the person who brought the torch out?
Of one of the employees.
So here's the question I have that's really starting to bother me now. So this obviously significant event happened. You know there was a torch brought out there, but nobody can identify any of the 3 employees that were participating in this.
Well, I'm sure they could go back and employee that. They slowed down.
I mean, the angle, to be honest, like, I can't see.
So you never asked any of your employees who was involved in this. I would think this would be something I would remember as an owner or a manager. But
It
you
was
can't.
very chaotic that day. I understand what you're saying, but it was very chaotic.
And they didn't get the citation until like a month later. Like the actual like violations on the.
Yes, I understand. We'll have this
There were a
discussion and
lot
you'll
of-
have a chance to present. I'm just perplexed that you can't identify. I mean, this was a significant event. Clearly you had 4 inspectors there that day and you didn't talk to your employees about, I would have had a one-on-one conversation.
That's why I had Evan. He was the CEO of the company. He handled that because he was outside the
So
entire time.
could Evan identify
I'm
this?
sure Evan could.
Okay.
So if you had a torch inside, and you had problems opening the lock, it had been frozen before?
They sell those torches. They're for heating up like a dab, like break, a dab break used for concentrates.
There it is.
It's over. It's been about 5 minutes.
So when was that? 14:28?
Yeah, 8 minutes.
Code enforcement liked that 14-14, that was 14 minutes.
You opened at 14:28?
Yeah.
Does the video show them putting the products back into the dumpster eventually? Or some kind of product back into the dumpster?
I don't believe so.
What is that?
Right?
I can identify someone.
This one.
Yeah, I can actually identify two people. Yeah, that's Jake Haymaker
So
and
what
that's
are they
Khaled with the
doing?
shovel.
They're looking to see if there's if they missed anything, any flour. Remember, because they found flour outside the dumpster, so they're looking through to make sure they grounded everything up.
And it's frozen.
Well, I don't think they're frozen. I don't think the dumpsters. Well, I don't think the
Remember,
inside.
there was a tank and something.
Why do they have a bag there?
Yeah, they're taking a root ball.
So they're removing materials from.
They're removing the root ball like we talked about again. That's part of the violation.
Climbing in?
Yeah, you can see him moving the 5-gallon drum out of the way. And they're just smashing the rest of the big dirt.
See that root ball right there? Yeah. That root ball right there. That was supposed to be destroyed. And it wasn't.
And so is the trash bag.
I didn't have all the root balls in there.
There was a tray in there.
Yeah.
Do you know what that second thing was that they just pulled out? of
That was
the-
the root ball.
More root
That was
mass.
the root ball. So it looks like they didn't destroy the root balls. So in there was, a
Did you say
violation.
root balls?
Root
Root
mass,
balls,
the second
yeah.
item
So
you're asking for was
It
root
looks like
mass.
there's more than one root ball. And Erica, the regulations for removing root balls, they're not in effect yet, right? From waste?
If they are in effect, they only went in effect the middle of August. I don't
Yeah, I
remember.
mean, they're not in effect this day.
No,
at
they
all.
are not.
So rules have been changed since
And,
February?
yeah, since February, the root ball.
They
definition-
removed roots from the definition of marijuana waste so that you don't have to grind up the root.
Erica, can you speak to why that change was made?
There was sufficient testimony provided to the board that roots are not a usable portion of the plant, that you can't, there's no THC in them, that you can't actually make a usable product out of them.
And they're difficult to grind up.
I expect that is also true.
Rich, do you recall when you were called to come back?
There's video of us when we get back. We had gotten, Mr. Collins and I had left, we'd gone back to our office. When we immediately walked away, Mr. Neal had followed me around to the parking area, and in essence, I said, well, when you get it open, give me a call back and we'll come back. So we had got back to our office, very short period of time, got a call that they had, so this was going on while we were, traveling back to our office.
Mr. Chair, quickly,
Yeah.
which office? Because I understand. that-
4700
Okay,
Elmore. Yes,
Elmore, as
yep, yep.
opposed to the one that's nearby here.
Yes, Elmore.
So we're 10 minutes away on a normal day, Neil?
Pardon?
We're 10 minutes away on a normal day.
10, 15, depending on lights. There, Lake goes to Tutor usually.
So when you do that, when you get it open, your expectation was you would see what was in there when you had left, not that, well, they've gone in there and they pulled out everything.
That would have been conventional thinking, yes.
So this is, what's your feeling about this, that they went in there and pulled stuff out?
I really can't give you an opinion. I'm not close enough to see what's going on and what's coming out. I can't say definitively anything from what's going on right here.
So having seen this, I mean, you conclude if they had not had it dumped and you looked in there and you go, oh, okay, it all looks good.
Well, they're saying the root balls or the root mass is coming out of there. I have no evidence to say that it's not.
Or that it is.
Or it is. I don't. I just.
So regardless, it's a violation anyways, because the root balls were supposed to be grounded up. So,
If they're root balls.
Right.
Well, I think one thing we see different from the video than we saw from the photographs is that they actually did take a mask out of the trash can and put it into the bag, but the photographs only showed was a bag, which led me to believe that they removed a bag from the dumpster that they carried in, which is substantially different than taking something out and putting it in a bag and then taking it back in.
How is that substantially different? Either way, they're still in violation.
You're right, but it just, it substantiates, in my opinion, what they were saying, because you could see it looked like a fuzzy, rooty thing. That, at least I could make that out visually when they pulled that out. And as opposed to a product that could be packaged in one thing and lifted by someone and carried away, right? Because what I had questioned was, is this a diversionary tactic, either moving into the system products that are from a illegal grow or out of illegal grow into the illegal market? But in this case, it wasn't in a bag.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
I apologize. So I'm going to jump ahead to when the waste hauler comes,
Okay.
because I don't think anything happens between now and then.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, what time is it now? So the employees are left, it's 14:34.
Eric, can I ask you a question? When the waste hauler comes, do they have to put a key in there, lock to open it?
No.
Or they just dump it automatically?
They just dump it.
Well, in this case, but usually speaking,
No.
I don't know.
That's not the way dumpsters are built. They're built so that they don't have to go out there and turn the key. They're built so that there's a mechanism that unlocks it if you have a proper, like, dumpster truck.
Thank you.
Right, so when the arms slide in, it to pick it up, that releases the latch.
So I'm going to speed up until.
What's that?
Who's this guy and what's he doing?
His name is Callan.
Caleb, he was the supervisor, one of the supervisors. And he's just double checking, probably locking it back up. I'm not sure,
I'm not
because
sure to be
she omitted
over
a window,
it,
so I
so
don't know who went back out there. You know, I was inside.
who knows? So, yeah, look
I
at the
mean,
time.
I can play all the video in between.
14:49 is
Yeah,
when they
that's
arrived.
when they arrived.
So 15 minutes after the employees finished.
Rich, you've got it on your call logs, what time Evan called you.
Yeah.
I just don't remember off the top of my head, but you just had it written down.
They confiscated the entire thing.
I have a 12:26, Evan called Officer Kern and said that they had to knock off and they would come back.
Yeah, 2:26. There's a
2:26.
slight time variation between that log and this log.
2:26. And that was what time was
So when you say, Rich, there's a slight time variation between that log and this log?
And in the imprint on the video,
Sure.
it is.
Like how much? Are we talking 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Okay.
A few
My
minutes?
recollection is that we determined there could have been as much as a 10 or 12 minute variation between some of the times that were quoted. Like, it was just very difficult when we're trying to match up things that were potentially 1 or 2 or 3 minutes apart. We really couldn't verify what had happened before what.
So was there any determination by the Marijuana Control Board when they were evaluating this first citation of, it appears the Muni inspector was called and about 20 minutes later, the dump truck showed up?
Well, because this is time stamp.
They didn't make any specific finding regarding that.
Okay. But the discussions, there was recognition that they didn't quite exactly mesh up.
Correct.
And when you say there's a 10 or 12-minute variation or so,
I mean, we had.
Is this faster or the call up? I'm trying to decide what is a reasonable assertion as to Rich was called. Is it 20 minutes later that the dumpster showed up, or is it 40 minutes later, or is it 10 minutes later?
I mean, we had 3 clocks we were working off. We had the Muni officers' watches or phones or whatever they were working off.
Right.
We had my investigators, time that they were working off of, and then we had the time that was actually on the video. And frankly, I don't remember which one seemed to be ahead or behind.
She doesn't know which one.
All right, so this is it. Is there anything else that happens between this and when you return? And do we have your return on the video?
Yes. I don't believe so, so I could jump ahead to that.
Eric, a quick question on from the scene when the bags went into the store, did your team think to ask for inside video of what happened to those bags? Because it seems like that chain would have been available as well.
So I actually asked Mr. Holscher about that this morning, and what he told me was that by the time we received the video, this video got it viewable in a format that we could look at it, and were able to go through it all. More than 48 days had passed, so the inside video wouldn't have been available.
Is this what's resulting in the recommended change of storage time that I've heard about?
I don't remember exactly when Chief Holscher brought that up as an issue. I mean, this is not the first time that we've heard about things that happened longer ago than 40 days, but this would be an example.
And so what's the new standard proposed?
The change that is either out for public comment or just finished being out for public comment, I believe, is 90 days. I'm going to jump ahead now.
So who is this?
It's Officer Collins and I in the white pickup truck.
3 o'clock.
So you got there, Rich, at 3 o'clock, and the dumpster was dumped, at what time you forced?
So it's 14:49,
So just a few minutes after.
2:59. So
Correct.
11 minutes later, they made
So
it.
really, all of this actually happened from the first time you left. I mean, it all happened within about 45 minutes or so?
Yes, yeah, it was fairly
I mean, this
good.
is a really quick timeline, actually.
Yes.
So it wasn't like you waited hours to go back.
No, when we received a call from Mr. Neal, that we basically turned right around and headed back.
Forrest, when did you first see them on scene? When did they come back on scene?
3 o'clock.
Inspectors.
1500.
1500.
1500. They've opened the So it only took about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to open once you got back.
Did they tell you that they're gonna pick up between visits?
It was obvious, I mean, the dumpster was empty, and we knew there was stuff in there.
But they didn't tell you that when they invited you to come back or you walked up?
No, they didn't give us forewarning that it had been empty, no.
Did they tell you at any time, you know, we have opened this, we have removed, forget this dumping, but like, our employees have opened this and removed things from this? Did they tell you that when you went back?
No. We were basically told it was open, it was available for inspection.
Mr. Fern, can you recall to your best of your ability sort of what is being discussed at this point, or any other details from this discussion?
No, I couldn't be comfortable saying anything specific. I do remember at this time, though, there was still leaves and small pieces of flour stuck to the bottom of the dumpster. I think in the exhibits, there's some exhibit photos that show that.
I actually never saw those photos, so they're not in my materials.
They're not.
No.
The testimony is there, though. It's written that it was the
Yeah,
case.
but the photos aren't in the materials provided from the state.
Okay. Is there any other sort of salient detail going forward, or have we sort of seen what we're here to see?
I'm gonna defer to Mr.
I think you're
Fern.
seeing I think it's kind of self-explanatory, and just the only thing is when we were first there, you were able to manipulate the lid of the dumpster a bit, so that's how we knew there was stuff in there. There was, you know, bags or whatever in there. You could peek, and I think that's how people were getting their paws in there and doing whatever, you know, grabbing stuff out if that was what was happening. But so we knew the dumpsters were full. So when we came back, it was obvious that they had been empty. Yeah.
What conversation happened once you realized it had been empty? You can summarize it, you don't have to give it to me word for word. But at some point, did you say to them, or did another inspector say to them?
I think we're at this stage. I think we're talking about getting the waste disposal program corrected. I mean, that's really what we're here for. What we're telling them is that come on, guys, you can do better. You got to do better. Is what I'm going to surmise this conversation most likely being.
And I guess what I'm trying to get to, Rich, is how did it come that, I mean, obviously you recognized at that moment it had been dumped, right?
Yes.
Obviously this has become a big part of the discussion, is this dumping without you seeing it was in there first. So that part, does that factor into the violation, or is the violation just there simply because, well, first of all, the attorney for the applicant testified that the group ball was part of the violation. So I'm trying to figure out how it all came together in the violation of the failure to allow the inspectors to inspect and the root ball, that inappropriate and potential disposal of it. At what point did you find?
We knew there was flour on the ground from previous visits. That's why we were back this time. So that was there was flour on the ground, and we were finding that told us that they were not following their waste disposal program properly. That was the purpose of this visit, is to check their waste disposal program. When we got back this time, we did find evidence of flour, so there was further evidence that they were not following the waste disposal program, and then them not giving us access to the dumpster was the element of the refusal of the inspection.
Mr. Dyson?
I'm just trying to picture you stand there looking in the thing, and you did a couple hours before wanting to inspect it and finding the darn thing's empty. So I would have suspected that they had done something sneaky to get rid of that thing during that relatively brief period. Get rid of the contents during that really brief period. It sounded like you were believing that it had been a previously scheduled thing and was not unusual.
That's not true. That's not the case at all. I assure you that's not the case at all. I definitely had some impure thoughts about what had happened, so.
Yeah, so kind of following up on Ms. Denboski's thing, did you confront them with?
Well, they said it had been empty. There was no doubt about
But
that.
did you confront them that they were doing it to evade?
I can't remember if I specifically said anything like that, but
Yeah.
I honestly have to say, yes, I did have that feeling. That was my feeling.
I would prefer you to say I had that thought.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
based on what you'd observed.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned, I didn't realize this before, that you were able to sort of flex up and see into the dumpster before it was empty.
Correct.
Could you describe anything that you saw in there? I mean, they said it was a root ball. Did you see a
I
root
remember
ball?
seeing black plastic bags, like a heavy-duty contractor bag, so I think it was on the top there.
Okay. But yeah, so other than that, you don't recall any other details from looking inside?
No, I remember the heavy-duty contractor bags.
Okay. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you were first there and the lock was frozen, before you went to get the lock cutter, did you ask them if they had a torch that they could thaw the lock out with?
No, I think somebody may have tried a lighter for a brief second, but that obviously was unsuccessful.
Mr. Weddle?
So somewhere, and I don't know, not in front of me, but in your report, your outline, said in your January inspection, the phrasing was, "This will be your last verbal warning," and you found some flour on the ground. And then you came back a week later to see if it was fixed. So the week prior to this wasn't the first time you found flour on the ground.
I think it was the odor. We were really, the time we were there on the 31st, the reason for that visit was odor, because we were having an ongoing odor problem. I think the 31st was the first time that we found the flour on the ground.
Okay, so it said this is the last verbal warning to refer to odor.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Any other questions for Mr. Fern or Ms. McConnell? Is there anything else you want to present that we haven't asked you about?
No.
Okay.
I do have one.
Mr. Constant?
So, we just went through the process of relicensing a number of organizations, right? And you kind of followed that process, I assume?
Yes.
So, do you know if we relicensed anyone that had taxes owing to the state other than this organization?
I don't know. I'm not aware of.
Right,
That's
so-
not something we would keep track of.
Really, it's not municipal business whether they owe taxes to the state, right?
Correct.
So, have you had any other organizations cited for waste on the ground or warned?
No.
And then, the smell violations, which are pretty consistent, do you have other entities that we have relicensed that had smell violations?
Yes.
Okay, and, okay, that's good, thank you.
Ms. Wynn Pearson?
One minor legal clarification. 1080-080 does say that the assembly will deny an application for renewal of a license if the assembly finds that the applicant is delinquent in the payment of taxes due, and it does not limit that to local taxes. So that is something that is the business of the assembly in determining whether or not to renew a local license.
I just want to clarify that this applicant is not delinquent because she is in a payment plan, and that's the tool that takes the payment, it takes the monies owed out of delinquent status and gives them a payment plan. If she fails to make a payment or is late, her payment plan is canceled, she goes immediately to delinquent instead of collection.
So then I have a follow-up question to that. Then, and this is probably a question to the clerk. Are we aware of any other licensees that, and this would be Mandy if she were here, have taxes owing to the state that we might have forwarded an approved license for?
We can get back to you on that, Mr. Constable.
Thank you, Chair.
So I guess I'd like to refocus this conversation. We're right now trying to ask evidentiary questions of Mr. Fern and Ms. McConnell to the degree that she can present what we have. Mr.
Thank you.
Trainee?
Erica, tell me what's the status of a root ball? Is it a dead item, or can it be reinvigorated by putting fertilizer on it?
No, it cannot.
So it's a dead item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Trainee.
one last thought for Erica since she's here. Erica, do you know if there are other entities that were just relicensed or in the relicensing process that owe the state taxes or are in this position of having a payment plan for taxes?
We have one other licensee that was delinquent in taxes. They are not in the municipality of Anchorage.
Okay.
And they were given a short period of time to get out of delinquency and onto a payment plan, which they did.
But we don't have another entity that
No,
you're aware of?
not in the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Welton? Yes.
I want to repeat that previous question, and so I'm going to read, and Mr. Rivera had the notes I was looking for. So this is January 31st of 18. The note is, there appeared to be marijuana waste on the ground near the dumpster and a smell of at the rear north of the building. Officer Fern and I showed the cannabis waste on the ground to the facility owner, Spotty, and informed her that this was unacceptable and that she could consider this as her last verbal warning. So that implies to me that that was a warning. This wasn't the first time cannabis waste was on the ground. Do you see that?
Yes, I don't recall there ever having been cannabis waste on the ground. I can't, this is Kevin Collins' log, I can't speak, but I'm not aware of there being any previous cases with actual waste outside of the dumpster.
Ms. Dombrowski?
Just to follow up on that then,
Mm.
so what Mr. Weddleton just read you from the other code enforcement officer's log, do you have any reason to believe that's not accurate?
No, I don't know why it would not be inaccurate.
So you just didn't have personal information about it, but what you're saying today is you have no reason to believe that his log is not accurate?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Fern. So at this time, I think my plan is going to be, we're going to end this portion. We'll have a brief time for audience participation, although I would urge, I'd remind the public participation, I remind the applicants that they will have the full time on September 11th to present their full case. I know there might be other members of the public who are interested in speaking for the purposes of speaking. But again, to summarize what we're going to do, on the night of the 11th, we'll have the presentation from the applicant. We will also hopefully have so if you have any other further questions of municipal employees that we can produce, that could be there, we hope to do that on the 11th. So between now and then, make those requests of me or of the clerk, and we'll try to find those people to bring. The other point is, so two other points. One, you have quite a lot of written materials already, and I urge you all to read through those. And two, any additional material that we might get from the municipality or from the state or any witnesses that we want to have there, we have to let the applicant know before September 11th. We have to keep them informed as if this makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Wynn Pearson, but what's it called? It's like the Brady rule kind of, but not exactly.
Yes, my understanding is that procedurally what will happen is that all material that is gathered prior to the creation of the assembly packets will go into the packet and be available as part of the assembly packet. If the record is augmented after that, the clerk's office, as my understanding, will make sure that the licensee and the applicant receive copies of all those materials at the same timing that the assembly receives them prior to the hearing on the issue.
Okay. Mr. Welton and Mr. Constant.
I have two points. One is, so you're confident that our meeting on the 11th will not be long and we'll have time to an hour?
I would call myself, I'm hoping, I'd say optimistic, not confident. If we could get our other business done in 2 hours, that leaves us 4 to.
I wonder, one other thing, I think I need to make a disclosure that just as we watch this, I didn't realize. I remember Brian Vanderwood is a friend of mine through Scouts, and he's got some involvement with the company that runs their dumpster. And I don't know if it was something in the packet, an email he sent me or a conversation we had, but there was some information got to me some way through Brian Vanderwood about this. I don't know, maybe on what it was, but I had talked to him at this conference.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that.
Yeah.
When Kevin Collins called the waste company, that's who he spoke with, is Mr. Vanderwood.
So it might have been just reading that.
Yes.
I believe Mr. Vanderwood was the driver.
Oh, he could have been, but I know
And
that's.
is interviewed in the interviews in the information.
Mr. Train?
Chairman, you could always start the meeting at 4 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock.
I could.
It's
Well,
not the end of the world.
to keep in mind, our intention is not to get this all finished on the night of the 11th. We're going to have another special meeting on the 14th with at least 3 hours of
And the
time
option
scheduled.
for you is start earlier. Right? You start it.
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, I had asked for this at the meeting the other day, and I hope that we can have this handed to us, that these materials be in a way that's very orderly, in the manner like the plastic bag amendments were spelled out and thoughtful and kind of very concise. So it's not just 300 pages that we have to kind of fight our way through to all be on the same page. And I trust that the clerk and the attorneys can help us do that.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I want to do a special meeting on the 14th is to give them time to produce those kind of documents. They might not be able to produce in time by the 11th, although they will certainly endeavor to do so. I'm confident. Mr. Bosky?
So I think the only other person that I could potentially see people having questions of is Kevin, the other code enforcement officer.
Yes, ma'am. Kevin Collins.
So it would be helpful, I think, to have him there that night. And I've already said that I'm gonna be in DC on the 14th, but I'm going to make it a point to call in. I hope it doesn't take 3 hours, I'm just saying.
We
You're
all-
taking away from my Smithsonian time.
We all share your desire, Mr. Bosky, although yours is perhaps a little more pressing because the Smithsonian is outstanding. Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, you probably answered this question, and my mind drifted. Have you, in inspections, seen particles of marijuana on the ground around the dumpsters, dealing with other vendors?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of answer you like, Mr. Dyson. Yes or no? Mrs. Jones?
Since you're in a regular special meeting, it's 3 minutes for public comment.
Oh.
So when you're ready for that, I've got my timer ready.
That's my, okay. We have assembly comment then as well, don't we?
I
No.
think you go after public audience participation.
Okay, all right, so unless there are any further questions from my colleagues, Mr. Peterson?
Thank you. Just one last question. Mr. Furner, in all the inspections that you've made, I assume you've been a code officer and have been inspecting other facilities other than marijuana in the past?
Yes.
Have you ever gotten bolt cutters to cut a lock off anywhere else before?
Not in this capacity, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Okay, at that time, we're gonna, actually, so that was 4A, Madam Clerk. Do we have continued public hearing on 5A? Do we need a motion do we need to take any further action to bring these up on the 11th, is my question? Any other motions today? Motion to
No,
continue?
No.
Okay.
Already before you.
Okay, great. Good, so now we're at audience participation. Is there anyone here who would like to be heard? All right, please state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Eugene Carlhaven. I live in Maxfield Valley. Follow the public process done appropriately. Decision made by the governing body. It's more like the public interest. Please note, I audit the public process in Maxfield Valley. Where do I begin? I'll be brief. Number one, when you had this public hearing at the assembly meeting on Tuesday night, which I was present, first concern that stands out is during the public hearing, you address how you're doing the process, ex parte, whatever, contact, whatever. You basically are changing your rules. The public was not aware of it. Obviously, assembly members were not aware because they were in violation of those rules that were stated. And so you've got a problem here, okay? Next, notice of this meeting. With respect, I follow notices. On the site, it was shown as tentative, 2 different locations, not knowing where it was going to be. I did call the clerk's office approximately 70 minutes before the meeting to get clarification, and it was going to be here, but never changed the tentative to get it confirmed. And the other thing that stood out is this. I appreciate the Assembly Member Dunbar asking this question. Can everyone in the audience hear? Okay, quote unquote. Myself responded, no. Barbara Jones, Ms. Book Clerk, responded, yes. Obviously, you had a problem here, and you didn't deal with it. But let's go in the last part. Listen, I'm all on focusing on what happened here. You've got weighty issues. Whatever issues you got, you had a situation where it was a free-for-all, not identified by the chair who's speaking. A lot of questions were asked and comments while that screen was up there, but you did not know who was speaking and getting permission from the chair. The end result is whoever's trying to figure out, you got a situation of who spoke, when, what, and also being able to hear. It was a single member constant for the record that I had the most difficulty hearing, and that's why I moved closer. Okay? With respect, I want to hear, and everyone should hear each other. And with that, wow, I got 47 seconds to spare, but I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Anyone else like to participate?
Yeah, Lorenzo Gonzalez, the last cents. I'll just keep it brief. Just so you guys know, that was a consistent issue that we had with our dumpster. It was broken into on a regular basis. There was also, I have evidence still from Cross Frontier, a metric tag from their dumpster that was obviously broken into and found on our property, which is miles away from our facility and not even in the immediate area. Cross Frontier. Cross Frontier, and I have a picture, and I'll produce it to you if you want. Yeah. So,
What did you find from Cross?
a metric tag out of their dumpster.
Metric.
Yeah, which is it's a tracking tag for marijuana.
So we'll have opportunity to hear from the defendant and all their information, or respondent, I'm not sure what the applicant, and all of their information on the 11th. That will be an opportunity to present a full case. I'll also note for everyone that the meeting on the 14th will take place at the Assembly Chambers, not here. And that will hopefully help us resolve some of the issues about who is speaking, what time, and being called on, and that kind of thing. And of course, it'll give us the opportunity to take an official vote, and it'll be easier for the clerks. And we'll have call-in facilities.
Do you know what time yet?
I believe it's at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Mr. Dyson, and then Mr. Traney. No, we
Sir?
we should do it.
Yes, sir.
You didn't mean to imply that the marijuana debris that was on the ground was the result of a break-in before, correct?
He's asking did you mean that the marijuana on the ground was from a break into your dumpster? And you're saying yes?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes, you didn't imply that?
No, I did imply that.
So the night before the inspection, there was a break-in?
Morning of, night before, after hours, every single day. We've already turned over our NVRs to the MPO, but if the video was still there, I would show you how many times people broke into the dumpster on a regular basis.
Including the night before the inspection?
Including the night of the inspection, yes, sir.
Before the inspection?
Before, yes.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked that.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Traney.
Of course, we've also got a work section of that community work agreement.
Yep. And
The same time, same place. Not same time, but the same place.
yeah, we're gonna do that work session
Rather
starting at noon.
than coming back here, we're gonna have
Yeah.
lunch there.
We'll do it all at the Assembly Chambers. We'll have lunch, and we'll have the work session and the full meeting. Okay. With that, I guess.
I do have one comment, sir.
Yeah, we have time for Assembly comments. We want to make them now. Then I would like to move to adjourn. We'll start with Mr. Peterson. Any comment?
No comment.
Ms. LaFrance?
A question, actually, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I have additional questions about laws and the check boxes in terms of if that's the criteria for renewal.
Yeah.
And a few other questions along those lines as well.
Yeah.
Shall I put that in an email to the attorney or
What-
attorneys?
What do the attorneys think?
Mr. Chair, you had asked our small group if we wanted to provide some instructions about what would happen. And that might be something that, obviously, that's an answer that Becky is going to have to give, but we were planning on having the attorneys prepare those findings for
Yeah.
fact and proposed amendments on the 14th.
But it is the case, correct me if I'm wrong, that Ms. LaFrance or any Assembly member could ask you directly and be protected by attorney-client privilege.
Certainly, the ex parte contact prohibition in the code specifically does not preclude you from asking for the advice of staff who are involved in the case at any time. So you may certainly, either if you want to ask those questions for the benefit of the body right now, you may email them to Dean and I at any time for legal advice. Okay, thank you.
Is that all right? Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Weddleton?
Not good, thank
training. Mr. Bosky, Mr. Constant?
Yeah, starting in 45 minutes and going until 6 p.m. tonight, the Good Firefighters of Anchorage Fire Department will be manning the corners across town with their annual Fill the Boot campaign, and I suggest you take $5 or something out of your pocket and be prepared to support the Muscular Dystrophy Association with our awesome Anchorage Fire Department.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. That also explains your shirt. Mr. Rivera?
No comment.
Mr. Croft?
Just that this process has brought up a lot of the issues around quasi-judicial and how we might handle that differently. And you, Mr. Chairman, others have been working on. I think probably what will come out of it is a straw man proposal to revise our rules on how we do it. And then we'll all obviously have a lot of input into what that means. I think it's easier than gathering everybody's thought. We'll just say, how about this? And then we all mess with it. But everything from moving it on the agenda to a specific place so we sort of recognize that we're in quasi-judicial mode, to different rules, to uniform rules. I'm still not sure why alcohol allows ex parte and other quasi-judicial don't. So I think we should treat them similarly and appropriately and separately. And so I'll be working on a proposal for you guys to rip apart on that.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Dyson. I have no comments. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
No opposition? We're adjourned.